Life and death.
The midlife crisis story, I don't think we see much of these days. Probably because there are much more pressing existential threats to us. But when we do this whole contemplating of life stuff, which I would hope that we'd all have the time and inclination to do, it's stuff like eating good food, traveling, having a family, and having the freedom to choose, which I think comes to mind for most people. But in our work-obsessed culture, that stuff takes a backseat until, bam, midlife, where the reality of death becomes much more apparent and we start reevaluating the value of work compared to those other things, and the stereotypes of the red sports car, tattoos and whatnot really come into focus.
I'm coming back to life! Not that I was dead or anything.
My word. I'm healing in places I didn't even know I had.
Now, I don't think I would ever get a red sports car because they seem kind of wasteful to me, but Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has come along and has me seriously reconsidering getting a tattoo.
That was over way too soon!
Hear that, Noah? Lance wants something a bit meatier.
So brew yourself a cuppa and get a nice snack, because there is a lot to cover. I dare say, even meaty enough for Lance. Also, really quick, I really like the inside of the case is them just chilling by the fire. I think that's a really neat touch that they added to the game. Or to the case. God damn it.
Looks like you're all mouth and no trousers, eh, Captain?
The end in the beginning. Okay, so since I want to focus a lot more on the themes and whatnot and keep to a specific structure / flow for this video, I'll probably be skipping over some pretty important stuff that the game needs explained, so we'll get as much of it done now as necessary. I'll be going over essentially endgame level knowledge right off the top, so consider this your spoiler warning for Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
Follow Zor's plan, push for the bridge and catch the baddies in a pincer. All right?
You're starting to sound awfully normal.
Well, you could also summarize it as rush 'em down and start the carnage.
When you put it like that.
Prepare for a suicide... a charge!
Because of some cosmological fidgy-widginess, the two worlds that were part of the two previous games are on a collision course and will destroy one another. In order to prevent this destruction, the queens of these two worlds create an ark dubbed Origin that holds these worlds as data, including the souls and intelligences of their denizens. The idea is that after the worlds finish their cataclysm, everyone can be reincarnated.
The time was upon us. The reboot process failed to initiate.
Unfortunately, these intelligences realize that means that they're in a way going to die, and so the Origin AI is corrupted by the desires of these souls and transforms into an entity referred to as Zed, who becomes the main antagonist for the game. Zed goes on to create Ionios, the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, by fusing the two previous worlds together. From that, we get two nations locked in an endless war, and colonies made up of child soldiers who know nothing but fighting.
We each have a lifespan of 10 years. We call them terms. Life begins with our first term and ends at the close of our 10th. And over the course of those 10 years, we fight continually.
The constant churn of these lives is overseen by Zed and his Mobius, humans who are granted extraordinary power and control, provided they uphold the endless now.
Fighting in order to live, and living to fight. That's the way of our world. Ionios.
Of course, change is inevitable, and despite the lifespan of these characters being restricted to 10 years, they have just enough to slowly but surely chip away at Mobius's control. Eventually, we join Noah and his party as they begin their fight to break free of this stasis. Chapter 1: Dogma. The opening of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 into the world of Ionios makes it clear that the entire world for these characters is just killing and fighting one another. That is all they are taught, and that is all they do. Their value, both on an individual level and a colony level, is determined by their ability to punch real good. Kills siphon energy from the now deceased, and this energy is collected into a thing called a flame clock, which is basically just a tank that holds human energy, bestowing buffs/debuffs on colony soldiers depending on how full it is, and also sustaining things like the Pheroneses that act as the heart of colonies, and the life of consoles. The use of human lives as fuel is one of the core design features of this world that leads to the tribalism that we see. Now, this chapter is called Dogma and not Tribalism, because if I understand correctly, tribalism is something that is innate, and I think given the amount of control over things the consoles have, I lean more toward these kinds of things being dogmatically enforced rather than innate. But despite all of that, at the end of this battle, we see Noah here treating the dead of both sides with a similar amount of respect, choosing to inconvenience his own party and perform the off-seeing duties to all of the fallen.
Ugh! Noah always does this. How many times is it we've had to walk home now?
This shows us that he is able to see the world differently and not fully buying into the dehumanization of the other side. The dogma that you need to kill in order to live.
You shouldn't be sending those guys off like that.
What? Why not?
Why are you like this, Noah? It's Agnes, our enemy.
Well, yeah. They don't have an officer, though, to send them.
Warp of pot is warp of heart, and warp of heart is warp of cooking.
What?
Side quest. Cooking! A more subtle way that the game mechanically does this whole dogma thing is through the buffs system. While the party is part of Colony 9, the game tells you that if you feed the flame clock, you'll get a buff, incentivizing you to keep a good kill count going. Having it dip below a certain amount though, and the whole party gets a debuff, punishing you for poor performance. This whole thing is immediately dropped fairly quickly and is essentially replaced with a much freer system of cooking. Where there is no penalty, you are incentivized to explore and find new recipes, but also you get to choose which buff you have. Those living under the colonies will see only one way of getting buffs, through killing. But those who have been liberated from that gain a much better system.
You want to settle the score? You do it with food. Calm and peaceful like.
Not long after that first mission, the party are sent on another, and by chance obtain the powers of Ouroboros, along with a similar party from the other side.
What did I just do? What? This hand. Is it mine?
Not really knowing what is going on, they attempt to come back to their respective colonies, but find that they are now perceived to be hostile.
If we get any closer to Colony 9, we're just going to end up getting surrounded.
And both groups have no choice but to flee their homes and end up back together. After a bit of back and forth, both parties reluctantly decide to team up given their situation, and eventually everyone becomes friendly and recognizes each other for the human beings they are, rather than just as the enemy.
They were the enemy. And go on, your special move?
I don't have a special move. What's the point? Why share details like that? I don't have hobbies.
Wow, colony dull.
This is the first shackle the game breaks, the one of dogma. Every colony believes they need to kill to live, and so the other side is needed as a thing to be killed, and nothing more. They're not fellow humans, they're just enemies.
Have you ever touched a mote of light from a Kavesi? They're the same as ours. On the other side, the people live hoping the same things as us.
Upon gaining the Ouroboros powers, the party are forced to both confront the humanity of the other side, but also be treated as the other from their own faction. For now, everyone participating in the colony system is literally blinded to the humanity of others.
What do you mean, why? enemy I fight, so don't you interfere! Ugh.
Pull the wool from your eyes, kid.
The first part of the game is the party basically just trying to flee and head for a place called the City.
You gotta find our hope. Our city. It's the only way you're gonna defeat the real enemy.
They are pursued and eventually hunted down by Silvercoat Ethel, a hero that has saved the protagonists before.
Ethel! Do you really not recognize us at all?
Disgusting.
With the help of this black fog, her vision becomes clearer, but then the party are attacked by the consul of the colony.
I suppose it's more fun this way. Well, don't you agree? It's the big bad boss. Boo!
Did we do it?
Wait! Something's wrong.
The powers of Ouroboros aren't enough, as the consul can sustain themselves using the lives stored in the flame clock.
He's stealing from the clocks.
I'm not stealing from them. I, as Mobius, have the right to do with the flame clocks as I please. You may hurt me as much as your heart's desire.
So Noah finally unleashes the Sword of the End to destroy the colony's flame clock, which allows them to defeat the consul.
I just wanted to play around a little more. No! I don't want to die!
With the flame clock broken, they have no need to fight to survive. Colony 4 is now taken out of the system and its people are free to live, and thanks to Ethel's prior experience with the party, they gain a much needed ally. Breaking through and seeing the humanity in others is not easy though, as the story brings to light with the treatment of Mio and Senna by some of the troops.
Yes, he died, fighting against Colony Psi. You animals killed him. Shot him right here. Clean through.
Many of the side quests for this colony deal with this issue, reinforcing the difficulty of bridging this divide. Much of the progression going forward is destroying flame clocks and the consul's influence, which does a lot to free the people of the colonies from overt control, but there are more ingrained things that prevent some from living more freely. They may not be explicitly blinded anymore, but the militaristic structure of the colonies also limits your freedom.
This power is a maelstrom that surrounds the world.
Chapter 2. Hierarchies.
A maelstrom eventually becomes a raging torrent that swallows lives without mercy.
It's no surprise the first hero you come across is Silvercoat Ethel, someone renowned for their incredible combat abilities, whose very soul yearns to fight.
A rematch with Kamaravi is everything. And that will give purpose to the remainder of our lives.
The world's starting philosophy is one of might makes right, and those who are strong enough to survive multiple battles are rewarded with higher positions among the colonies until they reach the level of commander. Unfortunately, whether you are a commander or a lieutenant or whatever else, there is something above you. Consuls. For colonies, consuls are the top of the hierarchy, since the queens are a sham. And since they are the antagonists, defeating them and freeing the colony from the flame clock is synonymous. They are, of course, the most powerful and cannot be held accountable to those underneath them, and so destroying them, destroying that topmost part of the hierarchy, is liberation.
The maggot that feasts on our dead. That will be you.
The colonies are built on hierarchies of power, and the reason I feel confident tying this concept in with the concept of living is that I have the personal belief that flattening of hierarchies and the ability to choose who has the power over you is indicative of more freedom. But also, I think one of the game's most important emotional beats deals specifically with this concept of might makes right. Early on in like the third opening of the game, we get a flashback to a time when our Kavesi party members were younger, and we are exposed to a character named Yoren. It's clear that he is weaker than everybody else, and in a way causes the team to lose this training test.
Now, you can carry on.
should have done that much sooner!
Later on, we find out that Yoren isn't part of the playable cast because he gave his life to protect lands. Yoren comes back though as a Mobius and kind of becomes a taunting villain for a bit. He lords his newfound power over the party, but in the end, the same pattern repeats, and he ends up sacrificing himself to save the party.
Run! This is who I am.
Isn't it?
The hierarchy in and of itself can be seen as a dogma. It trains you to believe that power is the answer, but the tragedy of Yoren is that it isn't. He obtained power, and his end is the same. The real issue is that Yoren should never have been a fighter. That was never who he was. But this system does not support a spirit such as his, and so he has to die.
Did you ditch training again just to work on this stuff?
Who's that? Lance?
This one's Uni, and this is Noah.
Creatives have no place in a world where might makes right, and so all they can really contribute is to sacrifice themselves for those who can.
Our lives can shine like gold, but scatter them to the wind and they still end up like this.
Talking about colony ranks.
Side quest, colony ranks.
First we have the lowly dirt, then there's tin. Tins go up to copper. Then you get iron. After that comes steel. Then you get the badass silver. And finally, you've hit the top, gold.
The ambition for colonies is to gain higher rank. Gold-ranked colonies are revered and looked up to, and dirt-ranked colonies are looked down upon and get access to fewer resources. Colonies are always striving for more and more, with the hope of a better life if they obtain higher ranks.
Last time a colony went gold? I think it was about 40 years ago. When you go gold, you're pardoned from fighting. That's why everybody busts their balls trying to rank up.
The grand tragedy of this system is that reaching gold is a lie.
But why? What did you even make the ranks for?
Because what else is gonna motivate you, eh? You humans, you need some kind of goal in your little lives. You want to give your blades an upgrade? You want to eat some nice food? Or you want to live longer?
Once you make it past the threshold, those who have the power strike you down. This is revealed when Uni is able to recall a memory of the final moments of a past life where she was part of a gold colony and was obliterated by a Mobius. Even if you play the game as intended, by winning, you lose.
And while you're trying to rise up, your life force grows brighter, so shiny. But then, once you've reached the top, there's nowhere to go but down. And that's no good, is it? Then it's harvest time.
Additionally, Silvercoat Ethel's colony is revealed to have been promoted to silver for being, really good, but then bumped right back down to dirt rank when she chose to exercise her individual desire to not murder someone in a weakened position. This demotion to dirt comes as a surprise because Ethel is so strong, but for those of us who are weak, this is just a matter of life. For the colonies, and even as we see in the city with Shania, the allure of status and power forces, or at least heavily influences, how you perceive your worth. And if what comes naturally to you is something that doesn't obtain power, then you are dirt, worthless. The paintbrush has no value and the gun will get you status.
When I do die, I want to at least be of some use.
I think the reason why Yoren smiles in the end here is that for the first time he could see his worth. If he can save lands, then in a way he has equal value.
There, all done.
Wow, amazing!
Hey. If we didn't have to fight each other, you think that could have been Yoren?
It's a shame because Yoren and Shania could have fulfilled a more fitting role.
Bet none of those farts could make art like this. This should be your calling.
But instead, they felt forced to be soldiers and defined themselves by their power and lived miserable lives as a result.
You think Shania was able to smile?
Next time round, she'll be fine.
Same as with Yoren.
Yeah. And next time, we will win.
I want to get stronger. And if Yoren surpassed me, I'll get even stronger than that. I won't be doing it for the recognition, nor to be liked. I'll do it for myself.
Even if people don't recognize it, right?
We're here. This is us. Let's keep being true to ourselves. What's wrong with that?
Same old plans.
Chapter 3.
Same old Senna.
Roles.
I mean, I don't really know anything. It's just, I think, isn't it fine if there's like one guy who makes the call for himself? You know?
Even if it ends up being pointless.
Hey, even pointless things can have a point. Down the line. I want to live my way. Take it one step at a time, the way I want. Really live.
So one of the most brilliant things about this game is the mechanic of class switching.
Whoa! You can lug this thing about without a power frame. Not bad.
This is not unique to Xenoblade Chronicles 3, but generally speaking, in video games, classes are tied to characters. For instance, in Triangle Strategy, Ana is the rogue. In Overwatch, Mercy is a healer, etc., etc. There are many reasons why this is the case, but predominantly it is a mechanical expression of that character. Ana, within the story of Triangle Strategy, is House Wolforce Assassin/Spy, so naturally she is classed such that her gameplay matches her character, right? It's like how you would give a certain character in a movie a certain look to visually represent their personality. In Xenoblade Chronicles 3, your main cast of characters can be any other class available in the game. Say you find a hero that has like, I don't know, a sailor-inspired schoolgirl outfit that plays support. Well, there's nothing stopping you from squeezing your big and meaty defense boy Lance into that outfit and fulfilling that role of healer. Not only is this doable, it is actively encouraged as you gain new classes for the characters. The characters learn additional skills and abilities that they get to keep even when switching to a different class. One criticism that you could levy at this mechanic is that it dilutes the personality of the characters, but I would say that that trade-off is absolutely worth it since it better supports the narrative and the idea of what it means to be free. Your main cast aren't confined to being the tank or the healer or whatever, they can choose to be other things if they desire. They just need to learn. This is just another way the game breaks you out of these restrictive systems. Dogma makes you, by circumstance, see the world and others in a certain way. And hierarchies dictate your access to certain things like resources and control, and now the roles restrict your behavior. In Xenoblade 3's mechanical expression, it incentivizes you to break free of the standard paradigm, and gives the player the freedom to have whatever kind of party makeup they want. It allows them to freely switch between characters in the middle of fights to play the game as they please, and it gives the characters that kind of freedom as well. You may start the game thinking of Lance as the defensive tank, but by the end, Lance is just Lance. He is not restricted nor defined by his class.
Here's to us, the mighty weaklings.
Yeah.
Side quest: The Freedom of Triton.
A sparking Mobius.
One of the most interesting characters that you can get in the late game is actually one of the enemy, a consul, which is another swipe at Dogma/tribalism. This character has actually been around so long that he's old and senile.
See? There we go. Reminisce away, old-timer.
Back then, it was Colony Iota and
Forsin, I blundered with no clue.
send me into the deep.
Yeah, when I said reminisce, I meant about something relevant, yeah?
He is driven mostly by a core desire, much like other Mobius, but his is one of freedom and does not exert control on others.
I knew all sorts of spirited folk, but no matter who they were, the flame clock would end up being their reason for living. I wanted to do something, but not even these boat hooks could put a dent in that blasted thing. Need I explain any more? I knew you were the ones who could release my friends, trapped by that infernal clock.
Very appropriate that this Mobius is a pirate, but on top of that, his mechanics are also rather interesting because unlike the other heroes who are tied to a specific role like defense, support, or attack, you can actually choose which role any learned soul hacker fulfills. And the skills and abilities aren't fixed either, as you acquire them from defeating unique legendary monsters. The other cool thing about class switching is that it actually does more than just give freedom from roles, but leads into the concept of...
You will change the fate of others just by virtue of coming into contact with them.
Chapter 4. Alienation.
And breaking out of your shell, scrambling in desperation for a way to escape despair. That's not what I call being weak. You've defended this place for so long. Why? Because you're strong. And once you're no longer shackled by the rules of the flame clock, you can accept a different reality. You can become stronger still. I know it.
We can.
You can.
Okay, we're getting a little bit more abstract from here on in, and I'm also going to, I think, butcher this concept a little bit. But basically, the idea is that society used to be such that you knew the farmer that grew your food, and through that you could build bonds with them. You would be able to see their plight in yours and build a sense of community.
Every person I have met has shaped me and changed who I am. Thanks to them, I can choose the future.
But what if you lived in a world where those connections couldn't form? What if you were divided into nations and then into colonies and further into smaller squads? You become alienated from a lot of things, and your view of the world then becomes super narrow, which limits what you can even think of becoming. This is why the class switching is so perfect for this game. It incentivizes the characters to form parties, meet other heroes, and learn from them in order to acquire their class to use for themselves. I also like how it's not an instantaneous thing either. You don't get the hero's class for all characters immediately. One character becomes an inheritor and can begin leveling up, but after that, everyone else needs to see this class in action on the battlefield before they themselves can embody it. This is the idea that you cannot be what you cannot see in practice, expressed by a game mechanic. Side quest, the city.
When Guernica talked about it, it sounded kind of like a colony?
I was pretty sure it was an object.
The only populated place in the game that doesn't have Mobius influence is the city. Some time ago, it was founded by 7 people who broke free of the colony system, and now it stands as a beacon of hope and freedom for the main party in their fight against Mobius. There is a certain level of resentment here due to the main party in a way stealing the power of Ouroboros from a specially trained squad, but nonetheless fold our heroes into the plan to take down Mobius. The city aren't just your bog standard allies, they are an excellent representation of everything that the colonies and the main party want to become. It's, well, a city. Basically just a big melting pot of people from different ages, affiliations, and values, contributing in their own way to benefit all. It's not without fault, it's not a paradise. But as the game progresses, the city becomes more like that ideal, where you will find children, old people, soldiers, artists, Nopon, Kavesi, Agnian, and even a Mobius roaming around.
The many lives born of the city. Lives whose existence was never recorded in Origin. They are our future. They themselves are proof of the coming winds of change. I think I see. They are our hope.
If we go back down to the level of the colonies, once they are liberated, they are sort of just small, isolated nations that find it difficult to survive, requiring what's around them to get by. Colony Tau have to be hunter-gatherers, Colony 30 take advantage of their technological advantage, and Colony Lambda use their abundance of ether in a nearby mine. Each colony is tied to a certain role because it is alone. As you liberate more colonies and do more quests, certain characters from a colony will begin to show up in others, regardless of the Agni and Kevesi divide. One colony's boon can be exported to other places.
These spuds, they're the pride and joy of our colony. I'm so glad you like them. Really.
And certain skilled individuals that operate in a saturated market can find tremendous success in another colony. You begin to set up trade.
If we can discover many more of these spas, we could bring in people from other colonies.
Redistribution of resources, and even stuff that I would never really expect from a video game about teenagers, technology summits, and helping out with farming potatoes.
Now to wait for more rainfall.
Oh, I'm shaking with excitement.
Are you really?
Well, yeah, we all worked hard for this.
You tell him, love.
It would seem that in this less alienated system, dirt can be just as valuable as gold. Now, I know what you're thinking. Tomo, mate, all of these quests are really boring and a waste of time. You just go up to a character, watch them talk, and then wait by a field. Which is a really interesting point because, yes, though the game does throw in some monsters and stuff here and there, these quests do buck the trend of the usual video game design standard of increasing challenge or offering unique rewards or secrets in the late game, and instead offers a more realistic and thematic depiction of what it would actually take to have these colonies thrive. In video games, generally the language of violence and skill solves all problems and is rewarded, but here it is talk, interconnectivity, and trade that you will see in the endgame, and not only solves the problems of these colonies, but allows them to thrive for the future.
Come on, raise your head. You refuse to give in. You struggle to change things for the better. The way I see it, that's not weakness. Not from what I hear, anyway.
Okay, so since we're all already up here out in the weeds and muck of potatoes,
I stink of dirt.
I want to take this moment, since we're I think about halfway through things, and talk about something really neat about the structure of the game. Side quest, Symmetry.
How do you not know that?
This is shocking.
Absolute nonsense. I simply cannot believe this.
I don't know how to respond.
I don't think it is a coincidence that they changed the Mobius symbol to more of an infinity thing. Not only does it line up more thematically with the Endless Now, it differentiates it from Ouroboros, and it is a symbol that makes more obvious a symmetry. And within artistic mediums, Mobius as a motif is usually used to convey like doing the same thing again, but with a twist. And throughout this game, there are about 1 million examples of this exact thing happening. Here are just a few that aren't specifically in other parts of the video. So in the first half of the game, Mio is affected by the heat.
Hot. God. Oh, God.
And then in a later chapter, it is Uni, but in the cold.
It's so cold I might fall over.
Yoren's clumsiness is the same on the other side with Miyabi, and it just so happens that she also sacrifices herself to save someone else.
Thank you.
We've got Lance admitting to having a false bravado.
I'm just acting tough. To pump myself up like I'm not a wimp.
Which is shared by Ashura.
I know to you it must have seemed like I just spout nonsense and try to look cool. But really, I just want to escape. Escape the feeling that death is wrapped around my throat, ready to take me.
And there's exactly 2 instances after events with Yoren where Mio hurts herself with some soup, and then Lance arrives.
You lot, why are you making that stuff out here?
Apart from the symmetry here, I think it's also used to show that she isn't quite ready.
Ha! Really? Did you seriously just burn your tongue again?
She is still being hurt as the party deals with Yoren. But when she does end up saving Miyabi and confronts smoldering Kamaravi, she is unwavering and unaffected by the heat of the moment.
I don't believe it's consistent with the warrior's way you follow.
Finally, this one's more subtle, and I'm amazed that I even noticed it, but Riku is just some, like, you know, random Noppon that somehow gets his hand on the Sword of the End and gives it to Noah, right?
What Riku say funny?
Nah, all good. We'll say I believe you.
Meh meh? Riku bothered by that wording.
In the final chapter, we get this not-so-subtle nod between Riku and Queen Melia, which is, you know, interesting. And there's also this scene here with Mio's former commander who, you know, just randomly forces Mio to be an Offseer, even though she is a remarkable fighter. And oh hey, look who it is that just happens to be there in the final chapter as part of Queen Naya's crew. How interesting.
How could anyone know all that?
Shocking, I know.
Absolutely. I simply cannot believe this.
If I'm going to accept things just because that's how they are, then maybe I've been living too long.
Chapter 5. Time. Time. As someone who is in their 30s now, this is a concept that I've increasingly been able to feel. Bumping into someone after more than a decade and finding out that they are married and with kids feels like a temporal punch to the guts. I really don't have any other way of describing it. The disconnect between who they were in my mind and who they are now in front of me is odd. And the first time I was actually cognizant of this feeling was when I was rewatching an old anime, and there was a character that I looked up to as like a role model. And seeing them on rewatch and figuring out that I was now older than them, that really did my head in. And this feeling only really comes about as you age, as you accumulate years. Children, and I think even teenagers, just don't have that time to grapple with this concept. And I think because of that, it's really brilliant for Xenoblade to have essentially a teenage cast, but limit their lifespan to 10 years. It's actually kind of interesting because this is the first concept that the party grapples with after they have been liberated. As soon as they are forced to come together, ending their tribalism, and after they are made outcasts of their previous hierarchy, they come face to face with someone with wrinkles. Then the first time they enter the city, they are exposed to the opposite end of the spectrum, and we see them learning what a baby is.
It's so small.
It's a little person.
It's so teensy tiny, but it moves.
Much rejoicing!
This exposure forces them to realize that their 10 years that they spend just fighting seems to have been wasted. For much of the game, it's kind of like going through a midlife crisis narrative, but instead of like, you know, a 40-year-old, it's a bunch of teenagers. It's once they are exposed to this larger scope of time that they realize that there's something greater than their own glory or that of their colony that they can fight for.
Feeling that warmth, part of nature's cycle. We need to protect that.
Side quest, Reincarnation.
In order for Mobius to exist, they must continue to claim life energy. And these cradles right here, they're used to recycle your lives. You live your lives in servitude so that Mobius can exist. And even in death, there's no release. You'll just keep getting recycled.
No way.
There's your shackles.
Earlier I talked about how characters are limited to a lifespan of 10 years. And though that in and of itself is a decent form of control, which I'll get into later, death is not freedom either, because the souls of these kids are recycled and put into new bodies to keep the endless war going. Sometimes these characters remember their past lives. As we know, it happened to Uni in a particularly cruel way. But another character, Ashura, has it even worse.
And another lovely gift. The pain keeps getting worse and worse. It'll become unbearable as homecoming nears. Until finally I go mad from the pain, and then...
And because of her memory, we find out that the peaceful off-seeing that happens to those who have managed to live out their full term wasn't always the case.
Today, soldiers fight and scrabble to survive for 10 years, all to be blessed with the honor of the homecoming ritual. But once, there was a time when there was no such thing. A consul would end them personally. No Offseers to be seen. In other words, an execution.
So, like what happens to gold rank colonies, on the individual level, I suspect that even if you remove the 10-year limit, if you are powerful enough to survive the full 10 years, you are put down. Only those who agree explicitly to uphold the system are allowed to be truly powerful. Enter Mobius. We have begun the late game, my friends, because we are hitting on a concept that now sits at the heart of the enemy. Of all of the ways Mobius controls the colonies, this is probably the most insidious. By making the lives of these people so short, you limit what they can accomplish, what they can even contemplate trying to do.
All we had to do was bash heads. No thinking, no nothing.
This is brutally realized toward the end of the game when we find out that a previous iteration of Noah and Mio had a child. And to see that they made this decision fully in the knowledge that at some point that child would be completely abandoned is absolutely heartbreaking. On another level, this time requirement, like the other forms of control, forces you down a certain path. With limited time, you have limited options. This is actually showcased by the party on the way to the city, as Mio is months away from the close of her 10th term, and this actually makes the normally cautious Triton suggest a reckless path and going against Mio's wishes.
I just have to ask, are you trying to push some agenda?
What? No, certainly not.
But you admit the east route is the safer option.
On top of this, I think the game comments on how past events chain people as well. As I brought up with Shania, the legacy of her family warped her view of what she should do. But for our main cast, Triton, as a strategist, had a failure in the past that has now made him overly cautious and rejects options that seem reckless to him.
Your caution dulls your insights.
I think this might be why it's important that these characters are so young. There's not much of a dilemma in what to do. They don't have much time to compare, and even less in the bank to gamble, so the bigger risk is always the best option, and so it makes sense for them to rush toward a future. Any future.
That from the husk.
Yeah.
You won't find yourself there.
Huh?
You've got to look to the present and the future only. The one in the past, it isn't you. Look to the future, and you can build yourself up however you like. You can become whoever you want to be. Be true to yourself.
This is the heart of the conflict in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, one of allowing time to flow, and one of preserving it at all costs.
You have come to stop the flow, have you not? This march of time, stilled for eternity. You intend to stop it by removing me.
So is it flowing, or is it stopped? You're not making any sense, mate.
The game is ostensibly a fight about the past, but unlike the time limit applied to our heroes, the past chaining you to a way of being affects Mobius as well.
That is why I'm here, you'll find. My existence alone, it is proof and evidence.
Cut the crap! Who in the world would possibly wish for this?
Chapter 6. Desire. Say you find someone that you love, whether it be a friend or a partner or even a family member, but you know that at some point in time, whether through disease or age or some kind of accident, that you'll lose their company. I think within all of us, there is something inherent that would make us want to change the world to have more time with that person. It's a compelling feeling, right? The desire to keep things the way they are, to preserve the good that we have. This is what Mobius represents.
All humanity yearns for it, the endless now.
And the game gets really explicit with things in the endgame. In the final battle of the game with Zed, as you go along, more and more concrete things begin to fade away, like the theater, and even the form of Zed himself, and then the game just points out that, yeah, you're literally fighting against the abstract concept of desire.
What you see over there, it's not Zed or Mobius, but a single, intense desire.
It's one of those moments where if you haven't figured out the other ways in which the game has been alluding to the narrative, it'll recontextualize everything that's happened. The colony system, the 10-year lifespan, the alienation, All of it is designed to provide forms of control over others in which to act out your desires, all from the comfort of never having to suffer the pain of change. The pain that is inevitable as a consequence of time flowing. The consoles take advantage of this structure and exert their power so that they can continue within the infinity of the endless now to sate their desires.
It's because it amuses me. This world is never boring. Not while your lives continue to make it so effervescent.
I get the impression that many would have rolled their eyes at the ending of the Yoren story since he gains all of that power, but still, through friendship, gives his life for his former party members. Not only is this something that this character repeats twice before now, I think it cements the idea that the whole point of Mobius is that they don't change. They can't. They have prevented time flowing for this purpose, and so making Yoren a Mobius would sure make him stronger, but fundamentally, he's the same person and will meet the same fate. And such it is for the other consoles chasing the same desires over an eternity.
Whether outside or indeed within, all is part of the flow.
Man, you're like a broken record.
It is, after all, part and parcel of my being.
Side quest, names. One really cool thing that stood out to me is how everything is referred to. The Agnians designate their colonies with the Greek alphabet, and the Kevesi use numbers. This is interesting because individuals have names. In a way, it makes them who they are.
But Mimi, I don't think it's right to call a person by a number.
And there's even a whole quest about that where you give names to characters that see themselves as essentially robots. Mobius, though, are referred to with the English alphabet, as if they were colonies and not individuals. Perhaps this is because they sit at that kind of power level, or maybe it's because they represent amalgamations of people and possibly ideas rather than individuals in their own right.
About Zed. He is not a person, but a concept.
Concept?
Everyone can feel uncertain, frightened. These feelings coagulated and then given human form, or Zed.
Colonies aren't given names because they're made up of people, not people themselves. This is a nice use of symbols to add a distinction to humanity and more abstract concepts. The more overt symbols used throughout the game are of course Mobius and Ouroboros. We've gone through Mobius already, so Ouroboros is the circle eating itself, forever, constantly changing. These symbols are another way the game reveals the real conflict in this world, that of change versus stasis. And I've already explained how this applies to the villains, but the entire story of the playable protagonists is one of change. Adapting to new environments, meeting new people, changing roles, finding solutions that don't involve murdering one another.
We'll make fields. Our own food supply. Grown with our own hands.
The desire for a change in your circumstances comes in direct conflict with the antagonist's desire for the endless now.
The present is all we need. That is our unyielding wish.
Another really tragic story within Xenoblade 3 is the one of N. In the past, one of the many infinite versions of Noah decided to become a Mobius. He was so distraught at losing his Mio that he caved and embraced the endless now, as long as Mio would be there beside him. During this time, there was another city that Noah cherished, even larger than the one that we know of. But in his deal with Zed, he had to destroy it all. And this moment here will allude to my grander point about control.
Tell me, how could you murder the city's people? Just think, they were the lives of your own kin. My own kin? You're wrong. They were nothing but mere chaff. They were superfluous for us Mobius living in the now. Furthermore, all those lives wouldn't have existed without me. As their original creator, I held dominion over their lives and deaths.
N saw these lives as his to destroy, since they came from him, just as his love for Mio made him think that she was his also.
You have stolen her away from me. I will extinguish you and take her back. Mio is mine.
She's not yours. She's mine. You are nothing. She belongs only to me!
But she never had the choice to live the endless now, and so N's desire is one that traps Neo for an eternity.
So you did it. Sealed our fate. Now we can live forever. But this future's been stamped out before its time. And I can't even disappear.
It's this Mio that has been acting behind the scenes to change things. She is the one to give the world a more humane homecoming ritual.
When their appointed hour arrives, should we not grant them an appropriate departure?
And when this particular party gives her the opportunity, she chooses to escape and help them fight by trading places with the Mio that we know.
Why are you showing me this? You are... No. All of you are my repentance. Repentance? How I wanted us to be.
Change, as we might see from the very design of this world, is a natural process. And so keeping anything in stasis requires some form of control. Having that friend that you love part of your life and protecting them from N and Z's point of view is not just about controlling them.
By my very existence, I will keep her from you.
But also the things that could affect them. Even when you try and control one thing, you may end up controlling everything.
Watch me! Rewind our clocks! Back to the start!
This desire, this fear of change is incredibly powerful, and defeating it takes a lot of time. And this ending gets a lot of flack for being too long, but I really like it. Not only do I like the design of Origin, notice how the base for the enemies, built around control, has a very restrictive, linear design compared to the rest of the world's more open one. But I also think the length is appropriate in terms of conveying the absolute grind that it takes to try and deal with this ideology. The structure of the fight is rather thematic also in of itself, and acts like a conclusion to the rest of the game. The fight with Zed has 3 phases. The first is really neat because it mechanically and thematically shackles you, and the end of this phase has the characters break their shackles, and we see why they are paired the way they are. 1. Breaking individual insecurities, which ties into hierarchies and roles and stuff like that.
I'll live for him! For Yoren! Live and keep my friends alive! This I swear!
I'm not gonna imitate others' ways of living anymore. I'm staying true to who I am, and that's the way it's going to be.
Don't make it too easy for us!
2. Letting go of the past, time, and dogma.
Who cares about the past? We aren't gonna give up!
I know what I have to do. I work to better myself, so I won't make the same mistakes. We are more than capable!
And 3. A sense of collectivism, alienation, and desire.
We've come this far harboring everyone's hopes and dreams. And so, we would never stop now. Not when we've come so far.
We won't lose to you. We'll fight for all the people alive. Their desires must build the bridge to the future. Playtime's over.
The growth of the party gives them the conviction they need here, and then are given a free Ouroboros chain attack, symbolizing the power of their desire for change, breaking what would shackle them as individuals. After this, the Zed battle becomes abstracted, and using the method of alienation, attempts to divide the characters to weaken them.
Are your bonds true? Allow me to essay.
Hey! Where's Leo and the others? We'll just have to take him down!
Defeating this, of course, requires an Avengers-esque sequence where the heroes you've befriended join in on the fight.
Everyone, lend Ouroboros your power. All is for the future connected.
Now, to stamp out this evil at its source.
And then we get the last phase where Zed is finally defeated, but as N and M point out, only something born of the same sort of regret can truly destroy Zed.
Your thoughts, they can never affect a desire. But we who embody that very same desire.
And it is only in the kindness that the party shows to N and M.
You could try to move forwards again. after so long.
That they can now come forth and deliver the final blow and free the world.
You can take our place in the future.
I think this last part is kind of important because if you've ever tried arguing with someone online, chances are you're not going to be able to break through regardless of your facts or logic. Because reaching people with differing views often comes down to how much they feel you are like them. And so alright, since we're already in the muck and the grime of the internet, I think it's time we ascend and talk about the game's politics. Chapter 7. Conservatism is bad. I feel like it should be pretty clear that that is the game's stance now, but if you're one of those get politics out of my video games people and think that somehow Metal Gear Solid is not political, then I'll try to be more clear with this sort of summation of the game. Okay, the game has a bunch of young people being ostracized for becoming different. You spend the vast majority of the game breaking down and liberating colonies, freeing them from some of the previous hierarchies.
We be equal now, not tied to each other by time, or who be above and who be below.
But also from their constant need to fight.
You hated the very idea of fighting. That's how it seemed to me. And back then, I thought you'd never survive with that lofty ideal. I was blind.
Early game quests are about making colonies see each other as people rather than enemies.
Be a friend to all and an enemy of none.
And then late game quests are about more integration between colonies.
I'm not directly asking for help with a specific problem, but I'd like it if we could build friendly relations between us. If that's all right.
Now I see. Feel free to visit anytime.
The big bads of the game all want to preserve things just the way they are, and you as a player need to defeat them by bringing colonies together, learning new skills, and creating your own little hero team made up of representatives of basically every single faction. The final battle, I feel like, makes this abundantly clear, but here's a moment that super grabbed my attention that some of you may not actually come across. That quote comes from a very popular communist slogan and was popularized by ya boy, Karl Marx. And just quickly, Uni here saying it implies her being quite a bit more well-read than she comes off as.
I'll hit him, and then I'm gonna hit him again.
Anyway, this questline is entirely about this colony using its wealth and redistributing it to other colonies. In fact, redistribution is not part of the drudgery, it is the reward, which I think is quite the left-leaning statement. Side quest, conservatives in the city.
As long as they can hide away and cover their eyes, they don't give a damn about the rest.
So our lives mean nothing to them?
If they can't see or hear you, then as far as they're concerned, you don't even exist.
Closing their eyes to what's in front of them.
A lot of folks here think that way.
But that's just like Mobius. Then the only difference is whether or not they benefit directly.
They don't play as prominent a role, but if you take the time to talk to people in the city, you will hear rumblings of factions, because the city seems to have a political system, and there are straight-up conservatives here who don't take as kindly to the things that are being done. To aid in the idea of the city being a melting pot, there is one quest that makes this much more direct, when these admittedly intimidating pirates from Colony 15 come and live in the city. We have a quest where one of these guys is assumed to have kidnapped a child. Oh no. But it turns out that they were just, training or whatever. And thanks to the party, everything gets solved nice and peaceful-like, kind of. The conservatives within the city are generally pretty obstructionist, if I remember correctly, trying to sabotage missions and stuff.
And the conservative leader, Garrett, who put you in touch with him? Me again. We'd round up all the unsavories and toss the trash all at once.
Though much of this is pretty basic, I think it makes the city a more nuanced place, and reveals the inherent desire for conservatism since these guys are free from Mobius influence. Despite these two forces being cast in the wrong, they are still given thought and empathy because this is a Lefty game.
Zed and the other Mobius, they wanted to protect the world too.
That's why they created one they could control.
Also, I want to talk about Juniper. Now, I will often preach the gospel of a game's mechanical expression, but in this wonderful case, we can actually go one level deeper and talk about the expression on a code level. You see, not only does the writing of Juniper's character and their interactions reflect their gender ambiguity, but within the very code, the gender variable assigned to them is not a 1 or a 0, it is a 2. The very definition of non-binary. And in the current culture war, I'm not sure you can get more left than that. This is a Lefty game. There's almost no part of it that isn't left-leaning, and its overall message, I think, is that conservatism is bad. It is a force that is powerful, innate to all of us, built from the fear of what is new, what is different, and the pain of change. But it is something that needs to be defeated. Change, as Uni says, is
fucking scary.
But without it, we can never move forward. We can never truly live. And it is in our desires to keep things the way they are that end up restricting the lives of so many others, because conservatism isn't just something that sits in the hearts of people. It is something that ends up reaching out and potentially constricting the world. The beginning in the end. After defeating Zed, the two worlds that fused to create Ionios begin to separate. We get a really bittersweet ending in that the heroes achieve their goal, but must let go of each other. It feels like it comes out of nowhere, but it's very appropriate because it makes us feel why Zed exists. This is painful. It hurts. It is a scary thing to lose people you've spent such a great time with, but that pain has to be something that you accept. It is a part of life, and it may come suddenly, but it is often the cost of living. The alternative is the endless now and the eternity of unfeeling stagnation.
This is the truth of our world. Memories melt in the morning light, and then a new day begins. Roads stretch out before us. So many paths. Which do you choose? That's up to you. Sometimes you might run astray. You'll stop, maybe cry in frustration. But you know, that's all right. For the roads, they go on without end. So look up, face forward, toward your chosen horizon, and just walk on.
After the credits, we cut back to the very opening prologue of the game, focusing on the clock and then young Noah's eyes. The message here, I think, is that all of those adventures, all of that time, the infinite number of lives lived, the infinite number destroyed, the endless amount of time occupied by Mobius and Zed, all of it, whether a 10-year term or an endless now, will feel like it exists in but the blink of an eye. Oh yeah, okay. Sorry. At the start of this I talked about tattoos, and I think if I were to get one, it would be this symbol. I'm too scared to get an Ouroboros in the eye, okay? But I would have it much like Noah does on his hand, which seems a bit weird, right? The mark of death seems like a bit of a bleak tattoo to have, but I think the purpose for those of us that aren't living on Ionios is not to remind us, well, it is to remind us of death, but for the purpose of living life. I think that's why the game spends a lot of care on off-seeing, even though there's not much of a mechanical or really like plot-heavy reason why that's the case. But this isn't really just a personal read, I don't think, because if we look at the collector's edition of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, you will find that on the back of the steelbook there is this whole term symbol. And if we look at the art book, we'll also find a similar sentiment where the first page is like a message from the devs written out there, which isn't really that important, but in the end, the final message is the term symbol. So even from the devs, the symbol that makes you confront death, just like the statistics that cause a midlife crisis, should be a reminder to us all to live life.
What about babies? You guys got any babies?